Hi everybody, how are you today? Just give me a second, I'm struggling with my technology here for a second. Just give me a second. Sorry guys. You know, technology is great for one thing, but when you want it to work, it doesn't really do what it needs to, right? Just give me 1 second. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for joining me on my session. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Leon van Rensburg. I work at BIM for SMME, and the initiative of this was really to get the SMME market a space to thrive as well. So can everybody see my screen? I'm sure that should be working fine. Just make sure about that. So look, I think there you go. All right. Cool. So it's been a very long day. People are, although it's online, you're not really physically active anywhere, besides in your offices or your house or wherever you're locked up in. So I thought today I'll start off by telling you a bit of a story. And the story I wanted to tell you is really about quite a few years ago. And the question I was thrust into was this construction site as a consultant for the property market, specifically in this case, it was a hotel. And I had to operate this facility once everybody had left the construction site. I had owner operators blasting my ears, asking me constantly, you know, Leon, we need to show a return on our investment. When are we going to be full? How's this important to, how's this going to correlate and get our return? I had the professional team on site constantly hammering me about, you know, Leon, we need to do these finishing touches. The snag list just kept on growing and growing and growing. The entry date became closer and closer. And what was very evident for me is that we constantly worked in silos. There's all this information that kept on flowing about. And we had the professional team talking a language that I couldn't really understand and comprehend. I had the owner operator instructing me to make sure that we get what we needed from this whole environment. So at the end of the day, they can make the money that they wanted to. And I was stuck there for a second. I realized that merging these two worlds is actually very, very difficult. And to get this to function perfectly is actually an impossible task. And what actually happened to me was, as the professional team left and the owner operators and people started coming in, I was heading for this massive crash. I was bracing for this impact because they had new technology in this hotel. I had no idea where to switch on the lights. It was a lighting system they imported from Germany. The TVs worked on a new system that DSTV was trying to bring into South Africa. And it's 6 o'clock in the evening, it's getting dark, and I can't switch on lights. The funny thing is that I had a proper handover. I knew exactly what was happening in my hotel. I understood the complexity of the systems. The manuals were all lying in my office. But at the moment when I needed it, that handover and those manuals made absolutely nothing to me. In a moment of panic, when things are going wrong, we can't just stop and go back and say, hang on, let me go and search through all my paperwork and pray that I get to see what I'm looking for. There's all this data, all this information flowing through this construction site and the property component, the operations component of this business all the time. And at no point did any of these actually line up. And the question that I had was, well, surely they tagged all the assets. Surely they had to mark all the air conditioners and the lighting systems and everything like that. They surely had to line that up. But my property management system that I was running at that time couldn't integrate with them. And there was this big barrier, this big divide that just couldn't be overcome very easily. And the reality is, as I mentioned before, trying to find information after the people that generated the information has left makes it very, very difficult. And for me, this is the impact of BIM currently in the property business. We generate this massive amount of information from the client, information from the professional team, but where do you find it? How is that structured? How do you know where to go look for what when you really need it? The other aspects that I started to think of is, how do I get ahead of the curve? So perhaps it's the instruction. So in the story that I was talking about, I joined the construction team only, I think it was about 2 years into the construction project. So I wasn't there at the start, but I was there at the finish. And the thought I kept on asking myself is, how do we get ahead of this curve? Surely we've got to get ahead of this race. And in order to get ahead, I realized we need to go back to the start. So getting back to the start meant for us that we had to look at how do we instruct the team. But before we could instruct the team, well, we already positioned a business plan through to the banks where we were borrowing the money from. So we had to look at our objectives. What were our objectives? How do we tie this in? How do we make all of these things work together? The information that is important to us at the end of the day was a critical success factor for us to ensure that we could obtain, well, firstly, the return on investment that the owner-operators were wishing for. Secondly, it was to achieve the objectives of the organization. I still work with a fantastic guy that says the reason for businesses currently is to make money. And it was testament from this property that I was at that this information that was generated meant absolutely nothing to me. We couldn't utilize that because we didn't understand it. We'll call something an air conditioning and the professional team calls it an HVAC system. You try and find something under air conditioning or cooling or anything like that and nothing comes up. And it's because our languages that we're speaking didn't synchronize at all. That led me to realize that the biggest portion of my time spent trying to operate this facility and making it a successful business that could continue for the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years, hopefully, that would be great, was time. Having the time and not going to constantly look for it. So one of the impacts that I realized was absolutely critical to us was, how do we take that information? How do we stay in touch with this information throughout the whole process? That when everybody has left and we need to operate this facility, that the time spent on it to find the information, to verify information, was reduced significantly. There was a very interesting stat that I heard in a training course I joined a couple of weeks ago. It's by a reputable company in the UK. And they said that 80% of time currently spent once the project people leave site, the professional team leaves and everybody handed over, 80% of time after that is spent verifying and checking for information. So by eliminating that, already we realize that we can start streamlining these things, we can start moving through a lot better. That meant we had to go back to our drawing board and we had to go look at our approach. How do you navigate this in a way where two separate languages is spoken effectively? And you've got to bring this together somehow and get to a single target. So for us, one of the things that we had to look at was breaking down our business objectives, making those tangible, making it smart. We had to look and ask ourselves, if we get this information, will it really have a bearing on our project? So let me give you an example. One of the things that were critical in the environment that we had, it was a 5-star boutique hotel, was the finishing. Obviously in a 5-star property is pretty important. So we had to have the actual data of the cloth and the paint and the carpets and those types of things that we utilize, so that if something is tarnished, we could easily and quickly replace the components that were missing. A lot of our time is spent trying to build this massive business plan, and anybody that knows me very well will tell you that the one thing that I really dislike doing is building a business plan. A business plan and a budget serves the same purpose in my mind. And I suppose it's got to do with my experience. And the purpose that it serves is that you're doing this to please somebody, but you never make that a live document. So in our business now, we make it that our budgets that we're running, it's a live document. It gets updated almost on a daily basis. So we are in touch. We know exactly where we're tracking. But the business plan that we originally generated, once we look back at that and we realized that we got a loan for massive amounts of money on a business plan that was submitted, to now revert that back into operations after the building has been constructed, it was over time, it was over budget. You know, some of the finishing wasn't really quite to what we expected it to be or what we wanted it to be. And now we still had to operate this facility. Already we are 3 foot behind where we needed to be to make this a success. So what we constantly had to look at is say, is our strategy correct? Do we involve the right players in this? Are we having the right people in the right key roles so that we can move this forward and easily navigate the short-term problem? The short-term problem that we faced was, how do we operate a facility with A, there was a lot of inexperienced people, and B, as effectively so the guests don't really experience what some of those laggards were that we had. These were some of our key strategic positionings that we took out. We then looked at it and we said, right, how do we make that tangible? Now, making it tangible for business, making it tangible in a project where you've got a professional team, architects, engineers, and everybody else in between that goes with that. And then you have your business directors, your operations component, your owner operators. We had to strike a balance. So the next project that we could take on could start aligning some of these things a little bit more, a little bit faster, a little bit more efficiently than what we could do in the beginning. That meant that we had to be very cognizant of which parts played the biggest role. So in order to do that, we had to look at ourselves. And since then, since working on this project, this is about 2010, 2011, I think. I've been involved with numerous projects, looking at why they fail, consulting from an owner-operator perspective to ensure that they get what they're really looking for. And the thing that's striking constantly is that when we're in this environment, we trust somebody with a lot of money, and we're praying that we're getting the same thing. Now, a question that I ask a lot of my clients is, do you go out and buy a car that you've never seen, you've never test driven it? And I'm not talking about your VW Beetle, your 1969 VW Beetle. I'm talking about, let's use a Ferrari in this example. Nobody in their right minds would walk out to a Ferrari shop or actually pick up the telephone and order this thing and not understand the mechanics of it, not what goes on in the engine, but how do you maintain it? What is the running costs? What are the important factors to take into consideration? So we do that with buildings, though. We do that with our projects. So often I've seen people just say, I've worked with these guys. If they say it's going to be 12 months, I know it's 18 months. If they say it's $10 million, I know it's going to be $12 million. I'm okay with that. Why do we trust people with that, but we don't trust information, the information we get? We trust people with money, and we trust people with something where when we go through the cycle, it can harm us significantly, but we don't trust people with information. And this was one of the key things that we took away throughout this whole process, was that we needed to start trusting the information. Well, initially we didn't. We had a team walking with the professional team, marking that, oh, this is Aircon 1, this is the asset tag. And, so we built up our information that was important to us, critical to the successes that we wanted to move forward. We needed to find ways of integrating, to streamline, to connect more effectively. I get asked quite frequently about the impact of BIM, and I think it's a very strange question, because the impact of BIM currently, as I mentioned in the start, is it's just more data, it's more information, but we don't really utilize it. But yet when we do our business plans, when we do our business objectives, when we look at expanding, when we're looking at starting something new, information is key. When you go out and you look to buy something, let's say it's something new, let's say a house as an example. We go out to look to buy a house. Majority of people's starting point is on Google or some web browser. From Google, they transcribe, they do their research, and then they move across to maybe speaking to an agent, or having show houses, or anything in that environment. Ultimately, you look at your property, you have done your research, average property values around the area, how far your rands or your dollars or your whatever currency you're going to be spending is going to stretch in that environment. And you have certain checkboxes. I don't know if any of you have seen the series, on DSTV, for instance, in South Africa. There's the channel 177 HDTV, and this is a specific component where people go to look for houses, and they have the specific 3 things that they need to tick to say that these are the houses. These are things that we do before we spend our own personal money. But yet, we don't integrate that as well with environments we don't understand. Now, I'm not saying you need to become an expert in architectural speak or engineering speak or construction speak or any of that helps you generate information on the project. But if this is going to be your pound of flesh, be involved. Ask the questions. If you don't understand something, make sure that you get the answers that you need. But most importantly, get the people involved that's trying to maintain and manage and need to make a success of this investment. And I think quite frequently that's the disjunct that we do. I was involved with a client down in Cape Town where we were sitting in this massive session. We had the architect there, we had the consulting engineer there, we had the project manager there, we had a principal agent from the client, we had a lawyer from the client, we had the client itself. And there was a new personality in the room, kind of tucked away in the corner. And when the session started, the consulting engineer asked, well, who's this person? And I said, well, they're the maintenance manager for this whole process. They have got experience on other projects, other properties, apologies, and they are the ones that know what are some of the key factors that is important to them. The important thing about that was from the design or from the concept phase, they already knew that they needed to focus on some things. I was involved with the client in a hospital, building one, and as a very stupid example, the toilet systems that they put into the hospital came with a maintenance plan. Now, who figures, right? The toilet coming with maintenance plan. But these maintenance checks were pretty standard. They would check the rings, they would check the seals, they would check the toilet seats. Are they fixed? Are they working? The handles, all of those. The fact is the client didn't know it at the time. So what did the client do? He went out, he hired 2 or 3 people. He kept stock of the toilets and additional stock of the rings and the seals and everything, washers, and everything else that he needed to. Until somebody put up their hand and I said, but hang on, you do know that this is all included when you purchase the toilets. That is the disconnect I'm talking about. That is the impact currently, in my opinion, that BIM has on the property business. We are disjuncted. We are siloed. We are not talking the same language. Mining, I think, is a very good example. Come from a mining family. And in order to overcome some of the barriers mindset, they created a language called Whanagalore. Now, I wish moving forward that there would be a Whanagalore for BIM, a simplified, understanding language that we can speak. And when we call a spade, everybody knows exactly what we're talking about. It's not the ace of spade, it's the actual spade, or is it? You know. For me, this is the last session of the day. And everybody is tired, and I wanted to take just a few seconds, a couple of minutes actually, run you through a personal experience of mine. There's my contact details. Please feel free, contact me. When we look at this, what's very important is that people understand the impact it has on their business. Not necessarily BIM, building information modeling and what the construction sites do and professional team, that's one thing. The question you should be asking yourself is, what is the impact on you if you're not involved on your sites and you're not keeping things under wraps and making sure that you understand what those things are. Thank you very much.